This recipe is for jam tarts. So in my bowl I've got 125 grams of plain flour and 60 grams of butter or margarine, and you just need to cut the fat into small bits in your bowl, and then you're going to rub in using your fingertips. So when you rub in, you want to use your hands like little scoops. So you scoop some flour, some fat into your hands, and you rub your thumbs over your fingertips, lifting the mixture up a little bit as you do it so it can fall back into the bowl. When you're making short crust pastry, we need everything in the bowl to be nice and cool. So fat straight from the fridge if possible. We don't want it to be go greasy, but you need to lift your fingers up, because as it falls down it just cools the fat off again from your fingertips, and it is just thumbs over fingertips. So this action, right? Try not to get any of the mixture on the palms of your hands. If you feel your hands, it's not a good time to do it, but if you put the back of one hand against the other and then against your fingertips, you can feel very often the palms of your hands are hotter, and they will make this mixture go a bit sweaty. If you've got really hot hands, you can run your wrists under cold water before you start rubbing in. And you can see I've been turning the bowl round as I go. You rub in until the mixture looks like breadcrumbs, which is how we would describe this. If you're not sure if you've rubbed all the fat in one go, you need to just shake your bowl. And when you shake it, any larger lumps rise up to the top. So we don't want this to stick together, and if you can see any larger lumps in there, then you just get rid of them. And once you've finished with the rubbing in, wash your hands. So I've got clean hands again, and I need to add the water to this. So you make a little well in the middle of your bowl. This is just the knife I used to cut up the butter. And we need 25 mils of water. You use 5 mils of water for every 25 grams of fat. And I've put nearly all my water in because sometimes it's a bit too much. I'm just going to add that last tiny little bit, and stir with your knife first. Don't put your hands in. Don't stir this with a spoon, because the spoon has a bowl and you tend to find that you have dry powder if you stir with a spoon. If you keep stirring with your knife to start with, what you should see is that the mixture starts to form clumps. When it starts forming clumps, you need to put your hands in and squeeze together, and this will come with practice, but you should be able to feel if all your mixture is going to form one dough, or if it's going to be a little bit too dry or too wet. If you've got your measurements right and you've done this right, we should have a nice clean bowl. Doesn't mean you don't have to wash it clean, but by that we mean a bowl, there we go, with nothing inside it and one ball of dough. Don't go mad putting the flour down on your worktop to roll this dough out. So just a little bit of flour, and knead your dough lightly. Now, because we're making individual jam tarts, we don't need to worry too much about the shape that we're rolling this. However, we've got to be able to pick them up, so we don't want them to stick. A little bit of flour on top, a little bit of flour underneath, and when you are rolling, you roll once away from you and try and keep the pressure even. Don't end up with a nice wedge of pastry, because that's not going to work. And then give your pastry a quarter turn. Roll once again away from you, and you keep doing this. If your dough sticks to the rolling pin like that, easiest thing to do the first time it happens, dip your hands in flour, rub a bit of flour over the top of your dough. Don't wait until the dough is completely stuck, but every time I roll this pastry, I give it a quarter turn. This way, if I think the pastry is about to stick, I can put a little bit more flour underneath it and keep going. And the reason that you roll away from you only, and not at 100 million different angles, not this way and that way and backwards and forwards, if you roll away from you, you keep your pastry the same depth. You put even pressure on your rolling pin, and as you can see, if your pastry has been well made, if you keep rolling, and don't soak it in flour, we can get your pastry rolled out nice and thin. This amount of pastry should make 12 jam tarts. So we want the thickness of the pastry to be just a little bit thinner than a coin. So we don't want to be too thick with the pastry. Your pastry cutters, the way you tell, and I apologise for my ancient looking bun tray here, the way you tell if your cutter is going to be the right size for your pastry is to actually put the cutter on the top. So if you look at that, I don't know if you can, how clearly you can see that, but if I put that on the top of there, that is about the same size as the hole in my bun tray. So that would be fine. This one fits inside it, that would be too small. This one is huge in comparison to that, and that would be too big. So the size that I need is this one that just fits. It's the same size as the top of the bun tray. So start at the outside, cut as many circles or shapes as you can. We're aiming to get 12 from this. So I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So my first rolling, I have 10 pastry shapes, and to start off with, I'm just resting them on top of the holes in my bun tray. So I want to get them off my worktop, out of the way, so I'm just going to put the 10 of those into the bun tray to start with. Move that out of the way for a moment, and then I said we should get 12. Pastry is always better the first time that you roll it. However, that amount of pastry should make me 12 circles. So I'm just scrunched up what's left, and I'm going to roll it again, and it's the same thing. So I've started, and I'm just going to roll once away from me, give it a turn, and just get this piece hopefully to the same thickness. So I just want to keep rolling until I have my pastry about the thickness of a coin, and I just need to make 2 more shapes from this. So hopefully that will be big enough. 1, 2, that's the 12. That's going into the bin. And I have 12 circles in my pastry. So once you've got your pastry done, all you need to do, if you've just left them on the top, you can see quite a few of them, the pastry, the weight of it itself just sinks down into the tray. So all you really need to do is make sure that these are in the centre and not off to one side like that. So just in the centre of each tray. And as I say, if your pastry is nice and thin, they just fall down on their own. So I'm just going to move those out of the way, give my worktop a quick wipe because I don't need any of these bits anymore. So let's just wipe that over quickly. and then I can do the jam for the filling. So the jam for the filling, any flavour of jam is fine, and got a bit of pastry in there. You just need 2 to 3 tablespoons. So put your jam into a small bowl. This is a dessert spoon that I'm using, and if I have to put a bit more jam in a minute, I will. And then to make this easier to put into your jam tarts, all you have to do is just stir the jam. And as you can see, as I'm stirring it, it goes nice and runny. So bring your bun tray back and use your spoon and just put a little bit of jam in each pastry case. Don't worry about trying to make it flat or even or anything else. Just make sure that you've got a little bit of jam in each pastry case. When the jam goes in the oven, as you've stirred it, it should melt. The other thing to remember is that your pastry will shrink a little bit as this cooks. So your pastry is going to shrink, so don't overfill these. If you splodge jam on the edge of the baking tray, it's going to burn. It's going to bubble and burn while it's in the oven, and it's going to make your baking tray a lot harder to clean at the end. So I've got a little bit of jam left, so I'm just going to look for the ones that look like they could have a tiny little bit more. Not too, there we go, as I said, not too high up the pastry cases. And then you can pop these in the oven. Remember to use your oven glove, get your friend to hold the door open for you. In the oven, gas mark 6, 180 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. So these jam tarts have been in the oven for 15 minutes, and I don't know if you can still see, but when I first took them out they were bubbling, so the jam is really, really hot. What you're looking for is a very light golden brown colour on the edge of the pastry, and the pastry has actually shrunk a little bit away from the edge of the tin. You saw how much jam I put in, and I didn't put loads in, but I've still got 1, 2 which have boiled over, 3. They've bubbled over, so don't put too much jam in, and you need to wait for a couple of minutes before you try to remove these from the tin. You're going to need your palette knife to get these out, but if you try and remove them while the jam, or they've just come out of the oven, the jam is going to be so hot that it will actually burn you. So don't try and move them until when you put your palette knife underneath the jam. Don't know if you can see that, but the jam slid to one side. I would wait until the jam is not quite so runny, so if you tip them you don't get boiling jam all over your fingers, because that will burn to a blister. So when they're cool and the jam is not sliding around anymore, use your palette knife, and if you don't remember which one, the palette knife is in your drawer. It's the one, it's always this rounded shape, and it bends so that you can push it underneath things. Use your palette knife, pop them on a cooling tray, and then your jam tarts are done.